To the state of manga in 2018. How many people caught my panel earlier today? Okay, so ignore the joke I'm about to make. You already heard it. So when it was time for me, I asked Anime Expo to let me do these panels at the last minute, and so I had the presentations ready to go, but I did my write-up fairly quickly. And the earlier panel today that you missed was called The Secret History of Manga, which is, it's a cool title, right? I mean, it's really interesting. I don't know how many secrets I actually told, but I thought it was a good name. This one I called The State of Manga in North America in 2018, which is really dull. You guys are really dedicated to be here. I'm going to do my best now to bombard you with numbers and not make it dull. I'll leave the judgment up to you. Before I get started, before I even introduce myself, unlike the panel that I did earlier today where I was trying to cram literally centuries of history into 60 minutes, for this panel, what I really prefer to do is actually take questions during the presentation. So if at any point there's something I'm saying that you would like more information or clarification, or I'm just being unclear, just throw your hand up and I'll pause for a moment and try to address that for you. Because again, this one, as I did say in the description, and it is true, if you like graphs and charts, this panel is made for you. So hello everybody, my name is Dallas Middaugh, and I have a company called Nonlinear World, and among the many things that I do there, I do analysis. And I've been working in manga now for about 20 years. I started with Viz back in 2000. After that, I founded or co-founded Seven Seas and Del Rey Manga. Del Rey Manga, of course, is now defunct. Wait, which one? Seven Seas or Del Rey? Both?
Seven Seas.
Awesome, Seven Seas. Yes, no, it's a great company. Jason and the team have done an amazing job with it. Jason was my co-founder, of course. And then after that, went on to start the Kodansha Comics line, and then subsequently left to go work for Crunchyroll, where I was the head of events and manga, and after that I've gone off to do my own thing. All of this is to hopefully demonstrate that I have some street cred around talking about manga. The truth is that once I started getting my hands on these numbers about a decade ago, I've been doing this analysis every year just because I like to understand what's going on in the market. This is the first time that I actually was able to take it out and show it to everybody else. So what we're going to talk about today, I talked a little bit about my company, blah, blah, blah. What we're going to talk about today are North American manga sales, and this is through the end of 2018. There is a reason why I haven't done the 2019 numbers. Number one is the obvious one, which is the 2019 is not over yet. But the other is that the source I had for these numbers kind of dried up, so I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do this again next year, but it's okay, because we're going to cover a lot of ground here with the numbers that we have. So the first thing to say is exactly what it says here: the future is bright. Manga sales have grown in this country every year since 2013. This is a very healthy place to be, because this is what it looks like for the past 17 years. And again, I went over this in my previous presentation, so I'll keep this one really short. Basically, 2002 up to 2007 represents a period when anime, thanks to things like Pokemon and Dragon Ball and Sailor Moon, was really starting to rise in prominence and become more popular. And right along with that came manga. This is the period when we had Naruto, which was just doing phenomenally well, Death Note. I'm sure I'm going to forget a ton of titles, but it was an explosive market. It's when a number of publishers started getting into the market, a market that was originally just Viz, and then was Viz and Tokyopop, and then was Viz, Tokyopop, Seven Seas, Del Rey Manga, Yen Press, and those are just the big ones. And what happened during this period was you could publish anything. There was such a demand for manga, and there was such a scarcity of it in this country, that as a publisher, you could acquire and publish anything, and it would go onto shelves and you would be fine. It would sell enough copies for you to make a profit or explode and become super gigantic. That didn't last forever. Over the years, from 2002 to 2007, so many publishers entered the market, and we went from seeing just a couple hundred books released in a year to seeing 700 or 800 released in a year, to at the peak in 2007 seeing 1,700 individual manga volumes released for that year. Yes?
Are pictures okay?
Oh yeah, pictures are fine. Actually, I've posted this on LinkedIn as a slide share. So if you just go in there and Google Manga State of the Union or whatever I called it, you can find it there. So, and if you have any trouble finding it, just let me know. I'm at dallas@nonlinear.world. I'm happy to just email it to you as well. So yeah, so pictures are fine, but you don't really need to take them. 2007 is when we hit the zenith in terms of manga sales, but then a number of things happened. The economy, the recession started, and this kind of chart happened for a lot of things besides manga. But this is also when Borders went out of business. Borders was, at the time, the premier retailer for manga, selling probably 25 to 35% of the market, which is gigantic. That's absolutely huge. And when they went away, most of those sales went right along with them. Most people did not find a new place to buy manga. They either went online to Piracy, or they just left the hobby entirely. And this caused us to be in decline for a period of about 5 years. Just a funny side note about Borders that I always like to point out. Does everybody remember Borders? People went to Borders, right? You know, yeah, no, it was a good store. It deserved to die. It was a wonderful bookstore. I'm not questioning its quality or just the fact that it existed. I honestly, I still love shopping at bookstores. But Barnes & Noble, I'm sorry, Borders, Freudian slip. Borders was so inefficiently run that it was extremely hard for it to make money. And just to give you two really good examples of that. Number one, every book that you see in the modern era has a barcode on the back of it, right? An ISBN, a barcode. Everybody else just uses that barcode to scan in and put it in the system, the point of sale system, and determine, you know, that it's sold and charge them the appropriate price. Borders had a system that required that their own stickers go on to every item of merchandise that went through their warehouse into the store, causing them to have to take an additional several weeks in order to get books into the store. And this was just ridiculous. I was stunned when I found this out when I moved into publishing at Random House. Causing a situation where when you published a book, you shipped it to Borders 3 weeks before you shipped it to Barnes & Noble. Because Borders needed the extra 3 weeks to sticker it and get it through their system, whereas Barnes & Noble said, just send it directly to the store, we're good. So, Borders. Goodbye, Borders. The recession continued. Nothing really replaced Borders. I mean, of course, Amazon grew. And we saw this period of decline for about 5 years until 2012, when we kind of hit the low point. 2012, by the way, was the time when I published Attack on Titan for the first time. I picked it up, acquired it from Kodansha for Kodansha Comics, but that actually wasn't a given. Kodansha still licenses to multiple publishers, including Dark Horse, among others. I brought in Attack on Titan Volume 1. It was doing very well in Japan. I presented it to the buyer as, this is it. This is a big title. You really need to pay attention to this one. Jim Killen, the buyer at Barnes & Noble, who has been there for like 35 years. He really knows his stuff. He knows his stuff. He listened to me. And he brought in a bunch of copies. He brought in more than would normally come. He would bring in on a first volume. And of course, what happened subsequently was it failed, and most of them had to be returned. Attack on Titan was a dismal failure when it launched in this country in 2012. I was pretty stunned. It was certainly not the only mistake that I have made in terms of acquiring manga, but it was a pretty big one. I wouldn't have been shocked if it hadn't sold quite as well as I thought it did, but really nobody bought the book. So I was completely shocked when in 2013 the anime started, and to my utter surprise, suddenly the book started selling out. What I printed on the first run of Attack on Titan Volume 1 was 10,000 copies, which is actually, that's a fair amount for a book, especially a new series that nobody had heard of. The danger of printing too many books when you're in charge of that sort of thing is that if you go too far beyond the actual demand, then you don't sell those books, which means you've just spent a ton of money printing books that nobody's going to buy, and all of a sudden your book becomes a money loser. Where it might not have been if the demand had been for, say, 4,000 and you printed 5, but if the demand is 4,000 and you print 10, you've just lost all your money. So, 10,000 wasn't selling. The anime came on, and we started to actually see some movement there. In fact, so much so that I had to go back for a second print. So, you know, I was feeling good. I took the chance. I printed another 10,000 copies. I was like, this looks good, man. I think we're good. That lasted 3 weeks. It was supposed to last the year. And based on that, we looked at it, looked at the trends, saw how it was going, and you take your best shot, and I go, ooh, we're gonna do 20,000. 20,000, which is dangerous, man, because if this thing goes south, we've just wasted a lot of money. And 6 weeks later, they were gone. And this just kept happening over and over again, and it escalated and escalated because I just didn't believe it. I didn't believe that Attack on Titan was going to drive the sales of the manga that strongly for that long. Obviously, I was wrong. And so we printed, finally, in the end, or the highest we ever got to was 100,000 copies of the first volume. 100,000, because I couldn't keep running out of books. I mean, when you run out of books, there's no books to buy. That's worse than having overprinted, is when there's a demand that you can't meet. So 100,000 copies, which I knew, even if like it was something crazy happened, that should last at least 6 months, and it was probably more than a year. And the next week, Loot Crate bought 90,000 copies, which is great. We printed another 100,000, and then we just kept it in stock going on from there. Why do I tell this story, aside from the fact that I just really enjoy telling that story? I tell it because Attack on Titan was the game changer. Attack on Titan, in fact, in my opinion, for both manga and anime, caused this upswing that has just been massive ever since. That is the point at which the tide shifted and everything started going up. Crunchyroll at the time had about 200,000 subscribers, I would guess. In 2016, they hit a million, and in 2018, they more than doubled that and went over 2 million. And all of this growth is timed roughly to when Attack on Titan came. Now, Attack on Titan ran its first season and then went for 16 years until the next season? It was a while. And let me just finish. And sorry, Lawrence, were you asking the question?
Oh no, it was 4.
Four years. No, it wasn't 16. I wasn't being literal. It went for a long time, but what happened was it brought so many people back, or helped them discover anime and manga for the first time. It did what Dragon Ball and Sailor Moon in the late 90s and Pokemon in 2000. It basically happened again, and Naruto in the mid 2000s, and on and on and on. And it's been really good news since then. Okay, so let's look at graphic novel sales trends in terms of books overall and different categories of graphic novels. In 2018, all print books, sales went up by about 1.8%, which is good. That is actually healthy growth. It's not massive, but it's healthy, and it's certainly better than going down. Graphic novels overall, by which I mean any kind of a comic that is published with a spine and has an ISBN, an International Standard Book Number. This is contrasted with comic books, by which I mean something that is usually about 20 to 40 pages long, has staples instead of a hard spine, and has no ISBN, usually has a UPC code. Obviously, there are always going to be exceptions to those rules, but that's the general guide here. Overall, graphic novels went up by about 12% in units, but gross was up by about 6%. Again, what I want to explain here too is that units is pretty obvious. That's the number of books sold. Gross is the book times its cover price. This is how we determine the overall size of the market. So if a $10 book sells 5 copies, that's $50 in gross. Units is the more interesting number here because tells you what people are buying. Gross tells you how much money is being made. A book can literally, and we'll talk about this in a minute, a book can cost $150 if it's a big deluxe edition, sell 2,000 copies, and impact this gross number. But in terms of units, that's not really a significant impact at all. Manga performed very well against all of that. Up 8% on units, up 7% on gross. The big winner for 2018 was juvenile graphic novels. Bookscan, and I'll explain that in a moment too, has two categories, juvenile and adult. And juvenile really does mean it's aimed at kids. So we're talking about things like Dogman. Who's heard of Dogman? Yeah. Who doesn't have a child? There we go. If you have a kid, you've heard of Dogman, and it does really, really well. But we're also talking about things like Amulet, Bone, lots of different types of books. Adult is a much broader catch-all category. Basically anything superhero is in there. Anything that is not specifically aimed at children goes into the adult category, and that includes most manga, not all, but most manga. Pokemon, for example, is in the juvenile list, but Dragon Ball Super is in the adult list. Okay, that wasn't the best example. Death Note is in the adult list. But still, that's the point I'm trying to make. I'm not sure that was helpful. Juvenile did amazingly well, and I'll dive deeper on that in a second. Adult graphic novels came down, and that was largely because actually of DC Comics. DC Comics did not have a good 2018. For the second year in a row, they did not have a movie that was successful in driving graphic novel sales, and that's something they've relied on a lot over the years. In all honesty, 2019, they're probably going to be fine because of the new Watchmen series going on HBO. That's a huge driver for them, and I think we'll see another big surge in Watchmen sales, blah, blah, blah. Diamond graphic novels was down, but let me go to the next slide and I'll explain what I mean by that. So where am I getting these numbers, right? I am not making them up out of whole cloth, I promise. There are two sources that I have for this information. One is Diamond Comics. Diamond Comics is the distributor to the traditional comic book store that I think we're all pretty familiar with. And there are about 2,000 to 2,500 comic book stores out there. They make their sales figures publicly available. They publish a top 500 list of graphic novels every month, so this is just a compilation of that. But where there's a weakness here in terms of the data is that I don't have anything below that top 500. So anything selling less than roughly 200 copies a month is not going to be in my analysis. Bookscan. Bookscan is run by Nielsen. This is the same company that does TV ratings. They track print sales. They cover 75% of the market. They do not cover comic book stores, which is a significant omission for them. They're actually working to try to fix that. And this is where they have the split into juvenile and adult, as opposed to Diamond that makes no such distinction. Juvenile. So what I am able to do, or used to be able to do, in Bookscan is to run a top 10,000 list. That's as much as I can get in terms of information. On the juvenile list, that's everything. And so if a book appears on that list in the juvenile category, it means at least one copy sold. That's all it takes for it to get onto the list. For the adult category, it's a top 10,000 list. Yeah?
Yeah, I have a question. For the Bookscan, is that just like physical bookstores, like brick and mortar, or is that online retailers also?
Oh, great question. So is that, for Bookscan, is that just brick and mortar retailer, or is that online as well? It does include online. So Amazon is included here. What's missing is the numbers for ebook sales. But for physical book sales, Amazon and Barnes & Noble online, there's all of the online retailers, the major ones are covered. Yeah, back there.
Does Diamond have geological statistics as far as what countries or regions are still? Also, does Comixology release or Amazon release their digital sales as well?
So the first question was, does Diamond provide any kind of geographic information about comics sold? And the answer is no, they don't. So it's just a catch-all. And in fact, as far as I'm aware, I could be wrong about this, The numbers that they make publicly available are North America only. I don't think they make the UK numbers available or elsewhere. I could be wrong, I'm not 100% certain about that. The second question was around getting numbers out of Comixology or Amazon for digital sales, and my response to that is good luck to you. They are locked up tighter than a vault. The age of people being willing to share sales numbers is rooted firmly in the 20th century and in print, when book publishers and retailers all decided that it was a good idea to share these numbers, because by having these numbers, they would be able to say what a bestseller was. And even more importantly, from an editor's standpoint, they would be able to say, if I'm going to publish a book that is military history, right? If I have BookScan, I can go look and see how military history books sell. Even better, if an author is presenting a book to me and they've sold books before, I have an objective third party that will tell me how many copies they sold, and now I can make decisions about like how much I want to market the book, how much I want to offer for it. For that reason, it would be great if digital numbers were available, but that's not where we are in the 21st century. Think Netflix, right? Netflix does not share a thing about how well anything is performing. Neither does Amazon, and so that data is more or less unavailable to us. Likewise, on the adult graphic novel list, in terms of the top 10,000, that does not include everything, so anything selling less than 100 copies in 2018 is not in here. I mention these things only to make sure that you understand that there are some holes in the data, although these I don't think are super significant. These holes are super significant. Digital, now what I know anecdotally and from my own experience, but again, I want to, actually when I was at Random House, somebody, I think it was the COO in a presentation, talked about anecdotal data, anecdata, and his phrase, which has stuck with me for over a decade, is anecdata is not real data. So take it for what you will, but knowing a lot of people in this business and having the opportunity to kind of ask around, digital graphic novel and comic sales roughly is about 10 to 15% of their business. They are still relying largely on print. The majority is in print. Contrast that with Japan, where actually over 50% of the manga are now sold as ebooks rather than physical books. So it's an interesting difference. So I have no information there. Scholastic book fairs. Who remembers Scholastic book fairs? Yeah, so that's a pretty good number. So anybody who doesn't, Scholastic brings a bunch of books or a catalog to local schools, gives people kids an opportunity to buy books, usually at a big discount. This is a really interesting, this is not an insignificant number. This is an extremely significant number. So something like Dogman that I mentioned before, or even the first volume of a popular manga that's appropriate for kids, can sell anywhere from 5,000 to 500,000 copies. So this is a significant piece of data that we don't have. However, nobody has it, nobody has ever had it, so I'm just going to ignore it. And then lastly, comic books, which I mentioned before. That data is available, but I am focused on graphic novels and manga specifically, so this is not in relation to comics. All right, so what are some of the drivers and trends? The first one is really obvious, anime. Anime sells manga with just a few exceptions, really only one that I can think of that I'll get to in a minute. The success of My Hero Academia drives huge success for the manga, as you'll see. The Ancient Magus Bride, same thing. And I mean, I could just keep going. Anything that has a popular anime, even a moderately popular anime, can be a significant driver of manga sales. Shonen, you'll notice here I use the term category, it's demographic, it's not a genre, but shonen, which is to say manga aimed at young boys, absolutely the #1 category by far. In the top 100 list that I'm going to show you in a minute, the first non-shonen title is a seinen title by Junji Ito, that's Uzumaki, it comes in at number 26. The first josei comes in at number 70, and My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness, which is an awesome book, by the way, is an outlier. But it's an outlier. It's actually one that hit these numbers largely because it appealed not to just the manga audience, but to an audience outside of manga. And then the first shoujo is Orange at number 100, and I'll be honest, that shocked me because shoujo's popular. I mean, shoujo does well, and in the top 100 list, it gets one book at the bottom, and that is not what I would have expected. It was a real big surprise. Manga represents roughly a quarter of the US graphic novel market. This again is just graphic novels, not comics. And in fact, if you take kids' graphic novels out of this, it gets closer to 50%. Manga does really, really well. Most manga outperform superhero graphic novels, as a good example. And certainly there are plenty, there are exceptions to that, but manga is actually a lot more popular than most people in the industry or outside of it realize. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do the white paper, because I just think that people don't know how huge and successful manga is. It's also possible that people don't care, but I don't care if they don't care. So this is a list of the top 50 graphic novels by units. And you may notice I'm not putting the actual figures in here. I'm comfortable sharing the units in gross, like the whole thing. Otherwise, this is information that a subscription to BookScan, a basic subscription to BookScan is $10,000 a year. To get the level of detail that I have is like $50,000 to $75,000 a year. So I'm careful about what I put out there. But as you can see, the first manga enters in here at position number 28. And of course it is My Hero Academia Volume 1. But take a look at the top 10. Actually, take a look at the top 20, because I want to point out a few things. Dogman, 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 Dogman. This collection of 6 books represents probably about 2 million copies of this series selling, with the most recent one being at number 1, which came out in December and sold 500,000 copies. There is no way for me to overstate how popular Dogman is. There's just not. And again, if you have a niece or a nephew that's in the range of like 6 to 12, just ask. They'll tell you all about it. Drama, Smile, and Sisters, Raina Telgemeier's books, round out the top 11. And moving on down the list, we actually don't get to a quote-unquote adult graphic novel until we get to number 15, where we hit Adventure Zone. Keep going from there, and yeah. Okay, if we skip My Hero Academia, the first adult book that enters in is Infinity Gauntlet at number 32. I just used this as a way to say, I wrote an article about this for Publishers Weekly a couple of months ago, and I think some people paid attention to it this time. Children's graphic novels dominate this market, and most people don't realize that. Nobody is out there talking about Dogman or The Last Kids on Earth, or even The Babysitter's Club. And meanwhile, behind the scenes, they are just selling tons and tons and tons of books. But let's get back to manga. This is the top 50 manga by units. My Hero Academia, My Hero Academia, My Hero Academia. In fact, of the top 20, 12 are My Hero Academia. Of the top 50, 47 of them are from Viz. Which should just give you an idea of the extent of their dominance of this market. If you look here at this top 50 list, with one exception, a single exception, every book here is driven by either a really successful anime or video game. Does anybody see what the exception is? It's not Super Mario, that's a video game. Berserk had an anime. And you're right, Berserk was successful before its anime, but when the anime came, it really drove Berserk up. And that was about 1.5 years, 2 years ago.
Shiver, that's the only one I haven't heard of.
Shiver, and in fact, Junji Ito appears here twice. There's Shiver and there's Uzumaki. Junji Ito is that rare exception that I was mentioning before. His works succeed on the strength of his art. and the strength of his books, and the strength of his name. Junji Ito is a brand unto himself now, in a way that not many mangaka can say they are in the United States. Yeah?
Was there an increase, because there was an anime based on some of his stories, not these specific graphic novels, but did that, even if it was successful prior, did that increase his success or not?
So and did that increase his manga sales? The answer is no, it had no effect whatsoever. The anime, which I don't know if you guys watched it, it's an anthology format, and it's a mixed bag. So some of the episodes are really good and really scary, and some of them just kind of leave you scratching your head, wondering why you're supposed to be scared of this, which is not usually the case in the manga. No, this is what I was saying before. When I say that anime drives sales, it has to be a successful anime. You know, I mean, I realize that seems obvious, but I think it bears saying, because as somebody who's been a manga publisher for most of my career, knowing that an anime is coming out does not necessarily mean that you should publish the manga. It's a really tough call. You look at it and you try to anticipate how that anime is going to perform. And if you think it's going to do moderately well, then sure, you take your chances. But the fact of the matter is, and I don't know how many people realize this, there's somewhere between 40 to 60 anime series coming every 3 months. There are 200 anime series running every year. Not all of them are going to be hits. They can't be. And so an anime can come out and have no effect on the manga whatsoever.
I actually have a question on this. Has anyone ever looked into the correlation on the availability of platforms for certain things? As we know, there's like more splits in the streaming market. So what if like something is on High Dive, but it's not on Crunchyroll or something? Would that be an effect of like how you might want to release the manga? Or if it's on Hulu as opposed to Crunchyroll or something, has anyone actually started to look at that correlation?
So the question was, has anybody tried to correlate where the anime streams with its potential success and therefore its impact on the manga? And the answer is yes, but it is done anecdotally. It's not done through any kind of a concrete analysis. Knowing that something, again, I'll just put myself back in the shoes of being a manga publisher, knowing that something is going to be on Crunchyroll means that it's going to be exposed to at least 2 million paid subscribers, and I think they're at 50 or 60 million registered users. Knowing that it's going to be on Funimation doesn't actually tell you anything, because Funimation doesn't share their numbers. But we know that they share all their content with Hulu, and Hulu doesn't share their numbers. My point here is really just to say, and then knowing something is on High Dive, same answer, and High Dive can in turn license it out. They used to be licensing all their stuff to, that was Sentai, they used to be licensing everything to Amazon, which they're not doing anymore. They're now partnered with Crunchyroll or with Verve, and you just see the point where the analysis just starts to fall apart, and all you can do is just look at it and just base it on your experience and cross your fingers and hope for the best. I'm very, very proud of the times that I have been right when I've taken a chance like that. And no, I will not discuss with you any of the times I was wrong. Taking a look at the top 50 manga by gross, which I explained earlier, gives us a different perspective, or at least a different story. Here we start to see some other titles popping up, but earlier when I mentioned the $150 book that sells 2,000, I don't know that it sold 2,000, but I feel confident in saying it sold less than 10,000, as opposed to My Hero Academia Volume 1, which probably sold in the neighborhood of 40 to 60,000 copies. But it being $150 means that if it sold 2,000 copies, that means that it grossed $300,000, and that's a lot of money, so it gets it up to the number 10 position. Everything up here, up in the top, yeah, these are all box sets or deluxe editions. Most manga are $10. None of the top 10 here are $10. They range in price from 30 on up to about 150 bucks. But one story is still the same, and that is that Viz has 47 of the top 50 titles, exactly as they had in the same chart on units. It's just different titles. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk basically about what what kind of a year each publisher had in 2018. And these are the publishers that I'm looking at. So remember, this is a 2018 analysis. So of the ones you see on the left, the 9 publishers, these are the publishers who released books in 2019. The other publishers that I mentioned here, I just want to acknowledge them. Denpa has released books, but they've released them, yes, and Denpa is awesome, and Chavez rocks. And Denpa released books, but they're in 2019. MediaDo is a publisher that works more on digital, actually exclusively on digital, but they don't release under the name MediaDo, they release under the name of the original Japanese publisher, so you don't really hear a lot about them. Digital manga, of course, has been around for a while. Soul Press is new on the market. They've done visual novels and light novels recently, and they're starting to do some manga. And likewise, J Novel Club, as the name implies, is a subscription service. They also sell the books, but their focus has been on light novels. They've only recently added a few manga to their catalog. So my focus is going to be on the list on the left. But just for fun, actually somebody asked me to do this in my consulting work, and once I did, I was just fascinated by it. They said to me, can you provide me with a list of everybody who, basically, who licenses from who in the United States? And the truth of the matter is, I've got like 15 Japanese publishers here. There are actually over 200 Japanese manga publishers. It's just the majority of them are very small. But when we look here, we see that just about everybody licenses from everybody. That's the takeaway here. That, and when I had a meeting with Futabasha and they saw I only had 2 lines next to their name, they were very clear with me about who else they licensed to, so I could fix the chart. So it's fairly accurate. So again, for a little bit of context, and the fact that in saying that Viz Media dominates the market, in units in 2018, and this is pretty consistent going back for the past decade, they have half the market. Half of the manga market in this country is just Viz. Yen comes in number 2, followed by Kodansha Comics and 7 Seas. Once we go past 7 Seas, the slivers start getting a lot smaller. These are publishers that have much fewer books, and those books, while successful, have not been as big as some of the books that these other publishers have done. It's also, I should point out, that all of the top 3 are actually American subsidiaries of Japanese publishing houses. Viz Media is co-owned by Shueisha and Shogakukan. Yen Press is owned by Kadokawa, well, technically by Kadokawa and Hachette, but I'm not going to bore you with the details. Kodansha clearly is Kodansha. 7 Seas is the only publisher of any size that is not directly owned by or invested in by a Japanese publisher. When we look at the market by gross, the picture's almost identical. The percentages shift slightly, but as you can see, and I'll just go do it back and forth, there's really not that much difference between these 2 slides. Before I go into the individual publishers, though, just a quick acknowledgement of piracy, and I'll try not to lose my temper. I think I can not lose my temper when I talk about this, because piracy really drives me nuts. I've mentioned what the legal digital represents in US comic sales, but pirate sites are continuing to grow, and that's not surprising at all, because number 1, you can't argue with free. I mean, getting the stuff for free is a lot of people are going to choose that. They're wrong too, but they're going to choose it. And manga is growing. So if manga is growing, illegal manga is going to grow as well. Manga Rock, a company that just absolutely galls me, is absolutely leading the charge. They're growing substantially over the past 2 years. And here's the thing, right? And I'll give them kudos I'll give them credit where it's due. They do a fantastic job. Their app, their website, they're top notch. Their app and web design is good enough that they have on their website that they are in fact an app developer. So if you'd like to hire them, give them a call. Don't give them a call. Yeah.
Are they Chinese?
They are not Chinese, they're Vietnamese. And they feel so protected that in fact they have pictures of their office with a link to the Google map telling you exactly where they are. It drives me insane. Because of course what they're doing is they're stealing. This is the part where, and to be clear, just to be clear, okay? I hope nobody takes that personally. I am not condemning the people who read the stuff. It's hard to resist. You know, manga's $10 a book. Reading the first 10 volumes of My Hero Academia is $100. Who wouldn't look at that and go, well, click, I'll read it here. But what happens, of course, is that manga interest goes up. We're still seeing some growth. But as we saw when Borders went out of business, people really started turning to piracy. And you know, anybody who's reading stuff, when they're reading stuff online, they're not allowing money to go. Oh my God, I'm going on a tirade, aren't I? I was really trying not to do that. Yes, you had a question.
I had a question about, I guess, you said that they feel very, very protected in Vietnam. And I'm just curious because I feel like given the size of the loss that they are inflicting upon companies that have a great deal of economic power, it remains somewhat surprising to me that no one has been able to put leverage on any of these companies. And is it that there's a kind of gentle, you know, don't rock the boat kind of mentality amongst publishers, or is it there's genuinely nothing that they can do?
Okay, so did everybody get the question?
Yes.
Pretty good? Okay. So there's a couple of answers to that. I'm trying to think of how much I feel comfortable saying in public. Oh, screw it, I don't work for a publisher anymore. So,
Come on.
okay, so there's two answers to that, right? One is that being in Vietnam, they actually are protected. There's a reason why they're comfortable putting their name and address up there. Now, mind you, I know for a fact, and this has actually happened, that were they in the porn industry and actually doing the same thing and putting their name and address up there, Guido and Luigi would be by with a baseball bat to take care of the problem. There was an anime about a year ago that was based on Uzumaki's short stories. I'm sorry, Junji Ito's short stories. And did that increase his manga sales? The answer is no, it had no effect whatsoever. The anime, which I don't know if you guys watched it, it's an anthology format and it's a mixed bag. So some of the episodes are really good and really scary. And some of them just kind of leave you scratching your head wondering why you're supposed to be scared of this, which is not usually the case in the manga. No, this is what I was saying before. When I say that anime drives sales, it has to be a successful anime. You know, and I mean, I realize that seems obvious, but I think it bears saying because as somebody who's been a manga publisher for most of my career, knowing that an anime is coming out does not necessarily mean that you should publish the manga. It's a really tough call. You look at it and you try to anticipate how that anime is going to perform. And if you think it's going to do moderately well, then sure, you take your chances. But the fact of the matter is, and I don't know how many people realize this, there's somewhere between 40 to 60 anime series coming every 3 months. There are 200 anime series running every year. Not all of them are going to be hits. They can't be. And so an anime can come out and have no effect on the manga whatsoever.
I actually have a question on this. Has anyone ever looked into the correlation on the availability of platforms for certain things? As we know, there's like more splits in the streaming market. So what if like something is on high dive, but it's not on Crunchyroll or something? Would that be an effect of like how you might want to release the manga? Or if it's on Hulu as opposed to Crunchyroll or something, has anyone actually started to look at that correlation?
So the question was, has anybody tried to correlate where the anime streams with its potential success and therefore its impact on the manga? And the answer is yes, but it is done anecdotally. It's not done through any kind of a concrete analysis. Knowing that something, again, I'll just put myself back in the shoes of being a manga publisher, knowing that something is going to be on Crunchyroll means that it's going to be exposed to at least 2 million paid subscribers, and I think they're at 50 or 60 million registered users. Knowing that it's going to be on Funimation doesn't actually tell you anything, because Funimation doesn't share their numbers. But we know that they share all their content with Hulu, and Hulu doesn't share their numbers. My point here is really just to say, and then knowing something is on High Dive, same answer, and High Dive can in turn license it out. They used to be licensing all their stuff to, that was Sentai, they used to be licensing everything to Amazon, which they're not doing anymore. They're now partnered with Crunchyroll or with Verve, and you just see the point where the analysis just starts to fall apart, and all you can do is just look at it and just base it on your experience and cross your fingers and hope for the best. I'm very, very proud of the times that I have been right when I've taken a chance like that. And no, I will not discuss with you any of the times I was wrong. Taking a look at the top 50 manga by gross, which I explained earlier, gives us a different perspective, or at least a different story. Here we start to see some other titles popping up, but earlier when I mentioned the $150 book that sells 2,000, I don't know that it sold 2,000, but I feel confident in saying it sold less than 10,000, as opposed to My Hero Academia Volume 1, which probably sold in the neighborhood of 40 to 60,000 copies. But it being $150 means that if it sold 2,000 copies, that means that it grossed $300,000, and that's a lot of money, so it gets it up to the number 10 position. Everything up here, up in the top, yeah, these are all box sets or deluxe editions. Most manga are $10. None of the top 10 here are $10. They range in price from 30 on up to about 150 bucks. But one story is still the same, and that is that Viz has 47 of the top 50 titles, exactly as they had in the same chart on units. It's just different titles. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk basically about what kind of a year each publisher had in 2018, and these are the publishers that I'm looking at. So remember, this is a 2018 analysis. So of the ones you see on the left, the 9 publishers, these are the publishers who released books in 2019. The other publishers that I mentioned here, I just want to acknowledge them. Denpa has released books, but they've released them, yes, and Denpa is awesome, and Chavez rocks. And Denpa released books, but they're in 2019. Media Do is a publisher that works more on digital, actually exclusively on digital, but they don't release under the name Media Do, they release under the name of the original Japanese publisher, so you don't really hear a lot about them. Digital manga, of course, has been around for a while. Soul Press is new on the market. They've done visual novels and light novels recently, and they're starting to do some manga. And likewise, J Novel Club, as the name implies, is a subscription service. They also sell the books, but their focus has been on light novels. They've only recently added a few manga to their catalog. So my focus is going to be on the list on the left. But just for fun, actually somebody asked me to do this in my consulting work, and once I did, I was just fascinated by it. They said to me, can you provide me with a list of everybody who licenses from who in the United States? And the truth of the matter is, I've got like 15 Japanese publishers here. There are actually over 200 Japanese manga publishers. It's just the majority of them are very small. But when we look here, we see that just about everybody licenses from everybody. That's the takeaway here. That, and when I had a meeting with Futabasha and they saw I only had 2 lines next to their name, they were very clear with me about who else they licensed to, so I could fix the chart. So it's fairly accurate. So again, for a little bit of context and the fact that in saying that Viz Media dominates the market, in units in 2018, and this is pretty consistent going back for the past decade, they have half the market. Half of the manga market in this country is just Viz. Yen comes in number 2, followed by Kodansha Comics and 7 Seas. Once we go past 7 Seas, the slivers start getting a lot smaller. These are publishers that have much fewer books, and those books, while successful, have not been as big as some of the books that these other publishers have done. It's also, I should point out, that all of the top 3 are actually American subsidiaries of Japanese publishing houses. Viz Media is co-owned by Shueisha and Shogakukan. Yen Press is owned by Kadokawa, well, technically by Kadokawa and Hachette, but I'm not going to bore you with the details. Kodansha clearly is Kodansha. Seven Seas is the only publisher of any size that is not directly owned by or invested in by a Japanese publisher. When we look at the market by gross, the picture's almost identical. The percentages shift slightly, but as you can see, and I'll just go do it back and forth, there's really not that much difference between these two slides. Before I go into the individual publishers though, just a quick acknowledgement of piracy, and I'll try not to lose my temper. I think I can not lose my temper when I talk about this, because piracy really drives me nuts. I've mentioned what the legal digital represents in US comic sales, but pirate sites are continuing to grow, and that's not surprising at all, because number one, you can't argue with free. I mean, getting the stuff for free is a lot of people are gonna choose that. They're wrong too, but they're gonna choose it. And manga is growing. So if manga's growing, illegal manga is going to grow as well. Manga Rock, a company that just absolutely galls me, is absolutely leading the charge. They're growing substantially over the past 2 years. And here's the thing, right? And I'll give them kudos I'll give them credit where it's due. They do a fantastic job. Their app, their website, they're top notch. Their app and web design is good enough that they have on their website that they are in fact an app developer. So if you'd like to hire them, give them a call. Don't give them a call. Yeah.
Are they Chinese?
They are not Chinese, they're Vietnamese. And they feel so protected that in fact they have pictures of their office with a link to the Google map telling you exactly where they are. It drives me insane. Because of course what they're doing is they're stealing. This is the part where, and to be clear, just to be clear, okay? I hope nobody takes that personally. I am not condemning the people who read the stuff. It's hard to resist. You know, manga's $10 a book. Reading the first 10 volumes of My Hero Academia is $100. Who wouldn't look at that and go, well, click, I'll read it here. But what happens, of course, is that manga interest goes up. We're still seeing some growth. But as we saw when Borders went out of business, people really started turning to piracy. And you know, anybody who's reading stuff, when they're reading stuff online, they're not allowing money to go. Oh my God, I'm going on a tirade, aren't I? I was really trying not to do that. Yes, you had a question.
I had a question about, I guess, you said that they feel very, very protected in Vietnam. And I'm just curious because I feel like given the size of the loss that they are inflicting upon companies that have a great deal of economic power, it remains somewhat surprising to me that no one has been able to put leverage on any of these companies. And is it that there's a kind of gentle, you know, don't rock the boat kind of mentality amongst publishers, or is it there's genuinely nothing that they can do?
Okay, so did everybody get the question? Yes. Pretty good? Okay. So there's a couple of answers to that. I'm trying to think of how much I feel comfortable saying in public. Oh, screw it, I don't work for a publisher anymore. So, okay, so there's two answers to that, right? One is that being in Vietnam, they actually are protected. There's a reason why they're comfortable putting their name and address up there. Now, mind you, I know for a fact, and this has actually happened, that were they in the porn industry and actually doing the same thing and putting their name and address up there, Guido and Luigi would be by with a baseball bat to take care of the problem. Okay, yes, I have thought about that. Okay, forget it, let's move on. But you know, piracy is really hard to fight. I mean, because think about it for a second before I give my second reason. The fact of the matter is that you can watch anything online, including Disney movies. And if anybody is going to fight that, it's going to be Disney. Now, Disney makes it hard to find, because that's the main thing that rights holders or the people who have the rights can do against pirates, is they make it very, very difficult to find them. They make it so that they don't show up in Google searches. But they're still out there, and with the right code, give me a second, I got to finish this train of thought. Punching the right thing into Google, you're gonna get there, right? But here's the second reason, and this is the reason that I'm being a little more cagey about, and I'll stop being cagey. Manga, okay, so Japan as a country does not litigate very much. They don't litigate, and they don't rely on lawyers in the way that we do in the West. One could argue very easily that we over-litigate here, that we sue people over things that are small, that just shouldn't, these lawsuits shouldn't happen. We have too many frivolous lawsuits. But in Japan, it's a hard extreme in the other direction. What this means is that culturally, they're not actually very comfortable with suing people. They're not really okay with it. They don't get it. They don't understand why they would have to. And so most manga publishers have turned a blind eye. But for years, the analogy that I've been making in terms, again, when I was trying to get inside the mind of somebody who would go online and read this stuff when they know it's illegal, and pirate sites do a good job of making it look like it's not illegal. That's part of their gig. But from the publisher standpoint, here's my analogy. So a publisher is a house, right? And you're walking by the house, and one day you notice the door is wide open, and there's a really expensive TV in there, and you go, "Ooh, okay, I'm gonna do it." And you walk in and you steal the TV and you walk away. And you know what you did was wrong. And the next day you're walking by the house and the door is open and the TV's back. So you take the TV. And the next day you walk back and they put up another TV. And about a week later you go, oh, they don't care. It's okay for me to take this TV. That's what ends up happening, in my opinion. Was there a question back there?
Yeah. You said that Manga has an app, so why haven't anyone contacted Google Play and PNC and Google Play to take off the app from the Play Store or the web phone?
Yeah, so Manga Rock has an app. Why hasn't anybody gotten the app taken down? Because what Manga Rock and in fact all manga pirate apps do is they don't host the material. What they do is they actually leech it from other pirate sites, like Manga Reader and Manga whatever. Why am I listing the pirate sites for you? No, let me finish. But here's the problem, right? So you can take this to Apple and Google. Google is more receptive to it. And this happens all the time. Crunchyroll does this all the time because they're trying to protect the rights of the anime that they have. And when you go to Google and you explain that this app is infringing on those rights, you can eventually get the app taken down. Now what the app maker does is just re-release it under a different name, and it just becomes this whack-a-mole game. What Apple does is to say, hey, listen, no, they're just pulling this from a website. You get the website taken down. The app's not our responsibility. Apple's not my favorite people. All right, let me move on. Oh yeah, go ahead.
So in the last year, in the Japanese market, there was a lot of stuff around Manga, and that eventually got, like, a bunch of Japanese ISPs voluntarily started blocking a manga piracy site that was rising in Japan. After that event, do you think we'll see any change in attitudes within the Japanese publishing industry towards this problem? Now that they've sort of had it blamed it for
now the Japanese publishers are starting to deal with it in their country. Will they start to deal with it outside their country?
Yeah.
And of course the answer is yes. Ebooks debuted in this country in 2007, roughly. As a publisher then, I begged the publishers I worked with to let me release their books digitally. I begged, I said, this is really important, guys, we've got to do this. This is how we fight piracy. They didn't do it. 5 years later, in 2012, ebooks, which had been around in Japan, but had never caught on, ebooks became a thing as Amazon went in with the Kindle, and the Apple iBook store became available there. And lo and behold, once the Japanese started making ebooks for their market, they decided it was okay to start making them for other markets. My point here being that yes, that's the key factor. It has to affect them in their home country. And when they start to deal with it in their home country, they become more comfortable with dealing with it outside their country. And I can't blame them entirely. I mean, if I was in their position and I was having a problem with Turkey, I don't know how to deal with a problem in Turkey, And it's easy for me to go, well, I'm too busy to deal with a problem in Turkey. But that's just not the way the world works anymore. It's an internet age, it's global, etc. I'm going to take one more question, and then I am going to keep going, because otherwise I'm not going to get through the rest of the slides. Yeah?
So Crunchyroll is primarily dealing with anime in its subscription service, basically. They also do have manga available as a subscription service in a sense. Is there any interest in making this an expanded project from Crunchyroll, Funimation, anywhere else? Is anyone looking into making this sort of thing happen more often?
My non-disclosure statement says that I can't actually answer that question. Here's what I'll tell you though, as far as what's available publicly, and I'll just go ahead and skip over to the next slide. There are some subscription model services out there. Viz has Shonen Jump, which is, in one sense, it's robust because it's got like 50 or 60 series from Shonen Jump, and they're really big ones. In the other sense, it's not robust because it's only Shonen Jump. You don't see anything else there, not even other Shueisha and Shogakukan properties. Manga Plus exists. It's the most recent 3 chapters of several types of manga, and this includes Shonen Jump and goes beyond. The reason it exists is not at all clear to me. With Shonen Jump, you can buy a subscription. With Manga Plus, you cannot. They're both from Shueisha. They're kind of competing with each other, but kind of not. I don't really understand. And then Crunchyroll, as you mentioned, they have that service. In fact, I used to run it, so they have about 80 series up there, of which probably 20 or 30 are actively being published, as opposed to just being completed. And then Comixology has their Comixology Unlimited service, but that's much more of a sampler. You're not going to get a complete series of anything there, usually. All right, let's talk about Viz for a second. So Viz had 292 releases in 2018. They had 2,091 unique titles. Of course, when I say a title, again here, My Hero Academia Volume 1 would be a title. My Hero Volume 2 would be a second title. So they have what this means is that they have a front list that represents about 10% of their list and a back list that represents about the other 90% in terms of books that are selling. The top series, the top grossing books are not a big surprise here. Of the top 39 manga in 2018, they all came from Viz. 69 of the top 100, My Hero Academia alone was 12% of their entire revenue from manga in 2018. And in the meantime, they're doing a few other things, but I'm just going to stay focused on the manga for right now. We already talked about the Shonen Jump subscription. Yen Press, 282 releases, 929 unique titles. Yen Press only had one series in the top 100, I believe, and that was Black Butler. That series actually comes from Square Enix. Square Enix has just announced that they're doing their own manga line now. In fact, I know all the people working on it. They're awesome. Buy every book they do. Those books, and in fact, I think it's tomorrow. I'm planning on going. Tomorrow afternoon, they're doing a panel where they're going to announce some of the other books that they're planning on releasing. It's really cool. The top 10% of their list represented 35% of their sales. This is not really shocking. The top books are going to be a significant chunk of your revenue. Yen tends to price its books higher on average than any of its competitors. Certainly more than Viz, Kodansha, or Seven Seas. Not more than Dark Horse, but that's a bit of an unusual case. And their revenue comes from a wider range of books than Viz, meaning that if Black Butler were to go away tomorrow, Yen Press would survive. If My Hero Academia were to go away tomorrow, of course Viz would survive. On the other hand, if they suddenly lost 12% of their income, it would be rough. And so it's a little bit dangerous when you have that much of your revenue invested in one series. Now, I don't know how dangerous it is because I don't think My Hero Academia is going anywhere anytime soon. Kodansha, 9 of the top 100, 154 releases, 755 unique titles. The interesting thing is, you may have noticed that in terms of percentages, Yen and Kodansha are actually pretty similar. They're pretty close. But Kodansha does it with a lot fewer books. And what that means is, because all I can talk about is how many units have sold, I can talk about the retail price, I have no direct insight into how much it cost them to make these books. What I can tell you is that making 282 books is more expensive than making 154. So in all probability, even though Yen Press is the second largest publisher, were one able to look at profitability, it would almost certainly be Kodansha in the number 2 slot. Attack on Titan, which at this point has had 70 releases, which is amazing because the manga series is up to like what, volume 24? 29, but then there's Before the Fall, and then there's Junior High, and then there's the repackages, and then there's the box sets, and yes, 70 releases. And it was 17% of their revenue in 2018. That is a dangerous place to be because Attack on Titan is going to enter into its last season soon. But they have plenty of good stuff happening in 2019 as well. They're not going anywhere. Seven Seas, 285 releases, 696 unique titles. Average book price for them, $13.96. Ancient Magus Bride, driven entirely by the success of the anime. Other titles in here, not really a big surprise. Devilman being their top grossing, of course, is because the book is priced at about $30. Seven Seas is less reliant on any single series. Ancient Magus Bride, their biggest series, was less than 10% of their revenue, so they're in a pretty secure place. Dark Horse, now following this, Dark Horse is fine, but following the same logic, Dark Horse is not in a secure place because over half of their revenue comes from sales of the Berserk series. And were Dark Horse solely a manga publisher, then that would be a problem. Dark Horse, of course, is not solely a manga publisher. They have a robust list of other books, American, European, they have toys, they have clothes, they make movies. So even if Berserk, in the unlikely event that Berserk suddenly just went and was not popular anymore, Dark Horse manga would be just fine. Dark Horse manga, I don't think it came out under this label, but they did do that Zelda encyclopedia like 5 years ago, and just between you and me, it sold well over 1 million copies. It was a big, big hit. Please don't repeat that. Oh God, Michael Gambos. I'm sorry, Michael. He's the guy who handles Dark Horse manga. I can move through these next few fairly quickly. Vertical is relying on Cheese Sweet Home. Again, I'll just follow the same train of thought. 23% of your revenue is dangerous, but it's not because no volume of Cheese Sweet Home in here has come out any later than 2016. Chi has become an evergreen title for them. This is a great place to be. There's an anime, but it's not the anime driving the success of this. Chi is just really cute and awesome, and people keep buying it. It's a great place for Vertical to be. These are some of the other publishers that I had mentioned. Udon, mainly in the manga space, they've got Kill la Kill, but they mostly make their money off of things like their Street Fighter adaptations, which are actually American-made. Tokyopop, which although they shuttered in 2008, never actually went out of business. Most people thought they did. What they did was they closed their North American office. Didn't go out of business, continued to operate in Europe, and just recently have started to make moves back into this market, where Disney manga is really their main source for revenue. One Piece Books, very, very small publisher, but they had The Rising of the Shield Hero, which has been a really successful manga for the anime for the past 6 months. Digital and Dempa, I talked about all of these guys already. I think that's the end. So you don't need to applaud because I know there were more questions. So we got a few minutes left. Does anybody have anything they want to know? Right in the back, yes.
Maybe a weird one, but when Berserk's author goes on his hiatuses, like, we have lots of time until we get the next chapter, sort of stuff. What does that do to Dark Horse?
When an author goes on a hiatus for a long time, what does it do to Dark Horse? In all honesty, it does the same thing for every publisher. It causes sales to go down. What happens is, it's a funny thing. New volumes of a series keeps the series fresh in everybody's minds. So let me just give you a good example. Full Metal Alchemist, right? We've all heard of it. The manga's fantastic. The manga finished a long time ago. So even though it is still, I would still argue that it's popular, you're probably unlikely to find it in bookstores because they tend to focus on the stuff that's continuing to come out. A long hiatus like that can be treated as the end of a series and then they can stop carrying the book. Then again, it eventually comes back and the whole cycle starts up again. So, it's gonna vary from person to person. Oh man, so many. All right, the other one in the back there, yes?
You mentioned earlier that companies used to release numbers for things like bestseller numbers. What do you think has changed in the market for a lot of companies now to not want to release that information?
So you said companies used to release bestseller numbers, and why is that? What has changed? Why do they not do that anymore? And actually, I'm really pleased that you asked that question, because that actually is not what I was trying to say. What I meant by that was that publishers shared, and retailers share all of their numbers with Bookscan. So they do share them with somebody. These numbers are then all compiled, and for anybody who subscribes, they get access to them. Little known fact, if you ever are reading an announcement of a print run of a book, subtract about 40% from it, and you'll know what the real print run is. Everybody exaggerates, everybody. If they're planning on printing 10,000, they'll announce 16, 17, maybe even 20,000, just to be able to get a little more attention. We only have a couple minutes left, and there were a bunch of questions, so yes.
I was going to say, speaking about just the popularity of manga in a larger scale outside of the anime fandom, would you say that it's more important to have a lot of book sales with something like My Hero Academia, where the name is getting into the households across the country? Or would you say it's more important to have things that bridge the genres, like we're talking about lesbian experience, we're talking about, I didn't talk about it, but I was thinking about My Brother's Husband.
Yeah,
things
that's a good one.
outside of the field.
So when we think of the cause for manga and spreading the love, is it better to have a mass hit that's focused on the manga audience, or is it better to have a crossover hit that brings new people in? Obviously, the best of both worlds is to have both. But then again, you have to think about it for a second. Is the person who reads My Lesbian Experience or My Brother's Husband, both amazing books, I'm not sure how likely they are to come in and start reading Tokyo Ghoul. So the answer is, at the end of the day, it's the mass market hits that make the biggest difference, because when something hits mass market, it starts showing up in merchandise, t-shirts and stuff like that. It starts showing up in places like Walmart and Target, and that's where it starts to become really well known, and people will start seeking it out. Let's get one more in, one last one, yes.
Yeah, you said that Attack on Titan was like the last big hit that really pushed the manga sales up. Do you think that the manga market in the US now is at a point where it no longer has to rely as much on a single title to carry it through in its market?
So the question was, I had said that Attack on Titan was the last big manga to really drive up the manga market. Is the manga market at a place where it doesn't have to rely on one big title anymore? It's a great question, and it's a great thing for us to end with, because the answer is yes. If it is a single title that is supporting the market, that's not good. That's not good, because what it means is that title eventually is people are going to lose interest in it, whether it's tomorrow or whether it's in 5 years. So what you want is exactly what has happened, which is Attack on Titan brought the audience in. That audience is spread out pretty far. If you were to take My Hero Academia out of the last couple of years, you wouldn't see as much growth, but you would still see growth. So the fact is that yes, we want those big hits to come, but they only work if they succeed in raising sales and unit sales on everything else as well. So, and the good news is, again, the reason why we are in this gentle incline in terms of sales is that that's happening. It is not, and as big as My Hero Academia is, remember, I said it was 12% of Viz's sales. That's significant, but that's not breaking the bank. That My Hero Academia could go away and we'd be fine. Thank you, guys.